going to switch gears a little bit with this next segment, and it's a little convoluted, so bear with us. But basically what I did, and I had to explain this to Greg, so I'm definitely have to explain this to the listeners, but I took the 12 Friday the 13th movies and I assigned sort of a category to them based on whatever I deciphered the theme of that movie to be. And in many of these cases, it's a joke. You know, like the theme that I came up with is meant to be funny, and it's not really the theme of the movie, but it's just sort of like the takeaway. That
encapsulates a characteristic of that particular movie.
Exactly. So as these movies go on, we start to stretch the definition a little bit further. But we can start with the first one, and you'll start to see the direction we're going with this. But first one is obviously Friday the 13th, and the category is favorite movie with a bad mom.
My favorite movie with a bad mom is Jaws 3. It's one of my go-to sit down and watch whenever I feel like movies. The shark is a mother in that movie, and her baby is captured and dies at the hands of SeaWorld, upon which she goes on a rampage and kills a bunch of vacationers. So it's very much like Pamela Voorhees.
I went with Sarah Connor from Terminator 2.
Ouch.
Because I think she has good intentions, but what mother is really going to do that? Like, prepare her son for something like that? I feel like there's another direction that she could have gone with protecting her son rather than preparing him for warfare. Maybe she could have focused her attention on changing the future so that he didn't have to be the leader of this, human army that was fighting the cyborgs. But there's a lot of questionable decisions that she makes in that movie. So yeah, Sarah Connor.
That's interesting. I mean, I see your point. She certainly becomes so much of a zealot that she is not a nurturing mother by any stretch, at least from a comforting, caregiving standpoint. She is shaping him for his, she would say, inevitable future, but they obviously have a fraught relationship because of that. That's hilarious. In regards to Friday the 13th Part 2, what's your favorite movie involving a wheelchair?
I went with Rear Window.
Oh.
But the 1998 TV remake with Christopher Reeve and Daryl Hannah.
Wow.
Actually, no, the original. Rear Window is a really cool movie. And Jimmy Stewart spends the entire movie in a wheelchair, so that's my pick.
Nice. I like that movie. I went with The Changeling, which is a 1980 George C. Scott haunted house movie that I watched a ton in college with my buddy Chris, and has got some genuinely creepy ghost story elements, and has one scene where a wheelchair chases a woman down the length of an attic, and it was scary as shit. It's a fun, creepy, kind of a gentle horror movie, but is a little bit of a forgotten classic.
I really thought you were going to go with Murderball. All right, the third one is a little bit more obvious, but what's your favorite 3D movie? And I think I already know the answer.
It's Jaws 3. I actually saw it in 3D in the theater when it came out, and it's got the perfect mixture of goofy 3D stunts that Friday the 13th Part 3 tries to achieve. But, this has a floating fish head and a floating arm, and just there's a lot of great 3D stuff. And plus the movie's just a fucking hilarious joke.
This is a tough one for me to answer because I'm legally blind in my right eye, so I can't actually see like 3D effects. So I don't go to 3D movies. I did see Gravity in 3D, but that was just because my wife and I like to try to see all the Best Picture nominees before the Oscars every year. And for whatever reason, we were just really behind that year. And the only version of Gravity that was still playing in the theater was the 3D version. And there were certain moments within that movie where I was like, oh, that's a 3D effect. That's a 3D effect. So like I'm aware of what was going on. I just don't fully appreciate it. But yeah, my answer was also Jaws 3D because like I don't even care about the 3D effects. Like when you watch that movie without the 3D effects, it's just so hilarious. The things that are like floating toward the screen and just how bad it looks. It's just so bad. but the movie itself is just incredibly entertaining.
I'd never seen Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D until that recent weekend, and it was the anaglyphic red and blue plastic glasses that came on a Blu-ray set, projected on his home theater screen, and the scenes of something jumping out at you like the snake or the yo-yo don't hold up. They're still a little bit too bifurcated, but there were some interesting depth of field effects that were achieved. Like there was one scene in particular where Chris and her friend Debbie were walking through a field, and there was some long, tall grass in the foreground that did kind of give a nice layering effect.
Really?
That was a little bit immersive, and we all kind of commented on like, oh, this is kind of cool.
That is cool, because that's not, like, I can watch Friday the 13th Part 3 and know, or at least say, well, that's a 3D effect, that's a 3D effect, but I never would have picked up on something like that. So that's cool that there may be some like subtle effects in there that I have not really considered.
In terms of Friday the 13th, the final chapter, what's your favorite movie with an obnoxious kid star?
I went with Jerry Maguire.
Oh.
I love the movie. I can't stand the kid. I
Lip
know
Nicky?
Yeah,
Oh.
I know. He's, was the huge selling point for that movie when it came out, but he just grates on my nerves. And as the older I get and the more times I've seen that movie, the more, like, there are times where he's charming and he's a fun kid, but I think you can tell that they kind of increased the role of the kid as they were filming when they realized what they were working with. And so there was just more of him, and it was just too much Lipnicki. And I know there's people listening to this who are like, there's no such thing as too much Lipnicki. But I think they pushed it a little bit too far. I think they could have dialed it back and made him a little bit more of a background character that had a few funny parts. But yeah, that kid drives me nuts.
Huh, that's fair. I mean, I haven't seen that movie since it first hit VHS. I liked it, but it just isn't one that I haven't felt the need to go back and revisit. But I bet if I did, I would probably wind up feeling the same way about that character. I did think that the human head weighs 8 pounds joke was pretty funny, but I think I can kind of see what I think your point is from what I remember. I'm going to hedge my bets a little bit with my answer. Because the first movie that came to mind was the animated Transformers, the movie, with Daniel, the human character. But he's not really in it very much, and he's not that obnoxious. So I decided that wasn't my real answer. My favorite movie with an obnoxious kid star is a little bit unfair because I don't think the kid's that obnoxious, but it's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which is a problematic movie in many respects. But I think Short Round is actually pretty goddamn awesome. And I really love the bond that Indiana Jones has with that little boy. They bicker and they have a banter back and forth with them that I find really charming. But they also have a lot of real affection for each other. And I thought it was a shame that we haven't seen Short Round in any of the sequels. But I can see where people would classify him as an obnoxious kid star.
Yeah, I went back and forth with this one because it was like, the way that I phrased it was like favorite movie with an obnoxious kid. So it's like, okay, you still like the movie, but there was a kid in it that was obnoxious. I did consider Temple of Doom. It's not one of my favorite movies, and so that's why I didn't consider it. I also thought about The Phantom Menace because, again, that's by far not one of my favorite movies, but it is a movie where the kid really like balances the edge of like destroying the movie or making it a good movie, and so like that's how I was kind of looking at it.
I totally get where you're coming from with that pick, and I that entered my mind too, but none of that blame can be laid at Jake Lloyd's
Absolutely.
feet.
Right.
People, and I'm not saying you were shitting on him. I feel the need to stick up for him whenever I can because he's had a lot of difficulties growing up with that albatross around his neck, and none of that was his fault.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't love Little Anakin, but I think that there never should have been a Little Anakin movie, and I wouldn't have done any better as a little 8-year-old kid than he did. So I totally get why you'd go there, but I couldn't bring myself to go there.
Yeah, that's fine. So for a new beginning, the category is favorite franchise left turn. So this is where, there were previous movies, and then at some point during the franchise, they made a decision that was just complete opposite of what we were used to seeing.
And I can't wait to hear what your answer is. My answer is Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, which interests me and entertains me more than any other of the Halloween movies. No shade on John Carpenter. The original is a classic, but Halloween 3 is so goddamn batshit crazy, and I love it like I would love a child.
Again, I kind of knew you were going to go that direction, so I just kind of wiped that option from my memory and tried to think of something else. And I struggled. So I came up with a few, and I'll give you quick explanations for all of them. So my first one is Fast Five.
Okay.
And the reason is because at least the first three movies in the Fast and the Furious franchise they're really douchey. I mean, there's no other way to describe them. Like, they're just not, like, they have not aged well.
Tokyo Drift was douche? I don't remember that
Yeah.
one. Was it? Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
I mean, I don't know. That's just my opinion. But
technically that's after the sixth movie. But
let's not get into the
Okay.
timeline. But and then the fourth Fast movie starting to veer into the direction. That's when like Walker and Diesel return. So it's like starting to go back. But 5 is where it just goes balls to the wall, total chaos.
Awesome.
And like, it's not a complete left turn, but it's like they're making a decision like, hey, it's not about street racing anymore. Now it's about heists and crazy action sequences.
They embrace the craziness
Yeah.
in that one like they had not before, and that's a great answer.
My second pick is just because of the sheer audacity of it, is Speed 2 Cruise Control. Because like there is absolutely no reason why that movie should have been made. As soon as Keanu Reeves said why he wasn't going to make it, whatever his reason, they should have been like, you know what, we're not going to do another Speed movie. But they went ahead and did it
That's
anyway.
hilarious.
So yeah, bravo to them.
I've never even seen it.
Oh, it's hilarious. I've actually seen it fairly recently, and it's like, it's terrible for its own reasons, but it's also pretty entertaining. And then my last one is Predator 2, because they took an idea and kind of flipped it on its side, and we're like, okay, we're going to take this character out of a remote, jungle where it's only impacting a handful of people, and then we're going to put it in this urban environment where now it's impacting tons of people. It's much cheesier than the original movie, but it was a bold step, and it was one of those things where if like you were pitching that idea, in a meeting, people would be like, wait, really? This is what you're thinking? But they went ahead and did it anyway, and it's not bad.
No, I mean, that's a great answer because I never even considered that to be a swerve. But you're right; it absolutely is. It takes the concept in a completely tangential direction. But that movie, I like that movie so much. Flaws fully admitted. That I never even considered that a swerve, but it is. You're right.
Yeah, I just saw it as like, you take something that was very primitive, you're in the jungle, you have limited weapons, and then you put it in an urban environment where you also have technology and funding, like research funding that's going into this hunt for this creature. So it's just kind of like, I just saw it as like two different sides of the coin.
Nice. For Jason Lives, Friday the 13th, Part 6, what's your favorite triumphant return?
I can't believe how many times we've mentioned it during this episode. I wanted to say Vin Diesel and Paul Walker for Fast and Furious, but there's a little bit of a cheat here. I ended up going with Billy Zabka and Ralph Macchio for Cobra Kai.
Oh, nice
because
answer.
There's nothing about that idea that should work. I remember when they announced that there was going to be this like YouTube Plus series called Cobra Kai, and I'm like, do we really need to see that? And I absolutely love that show, and they know exactly what it is. And Zabka is just like, I really am disappointed that he has not been nominated for awards because he's so good of just playing this like dumbass, and he just leans into it, and I love it. And Macchio is he's consistent. He's great, and I love the direction they've taken it in. So yeah, I know it's a TV series and not a show or not a movie, but that's my pick.
That's a beautiful answer, and I absolutely 100% agree with why you chose it. I grew up thinking of Billy Zabka as the blonde, preppy douche in every movie I'd ever seen him in. And to see how much comedic talent he has, his deadpan douchebag delivery is, I mean, just chef's kiss every time. And he is my wife and I love that show, and he's our favorite part. That's a fantastic answer. I went with Avengers Endgame, more because of my experience seeing it in the theater. Nobody thought that they were going to let Black Panther and Spider-Man be dead forever. We all knew they were going to come back from the snap.
Okay. I was kind of staring at the ceiling, wondering what the return was. I get it now.
But the moment when Captain America is facing what he knows is certain defeat, and then gets the radio signal of Sam Wilson, the Falcon, saying, "Cap, on your left," and then everybody comes out of the portholes, the audience went fucking bananas. And I've actually gone back and watched, YouTube reaction videos that people surreptitiously filmed in the theater just to kind of try and revisit that moment. And it's so different watching that movie at home without the audience for those scenes, because it just robs so much of the visceral drama of seeing T'Challa, Peter Parker step out of those portholes, and even people that didn't like characters that people didn't really give too much of a shit about, like Bucky or Doctor Strange. They were going nuts when they were coming back to defeat Thanos and his army. So that was a great movie to see opening night in the theater.
I love that pick. When my wife and I went to see Endgame in the theater, I don't remember what happened, but like, we're usually pretty good about getting to the theater early so we can get a good spot. But for like, maybe we just underestimated, how early people were going to get there. But it was this massive theater, and we ended up in the like front section, right in front of the screen. We were like 3 rows back, and it was an extra large screen. And it was a terrible seat. It was absolutely terrible. You had to like kind of sit sideways and look straight up.
Ugh.
And so I was kind of annoyed from the beginning, but then there were some moments where the crowd just erupted because it was completely sold out. And there were some moments where the crowd erupted. I remember like when Cap caught the axe,
yep.
and then the moment you mentioned, and it was one of those things where it kind of erased the unfortunate aspect of the fact that we were sitting, in a really shitty seat. We're like, okay, we're surrounded by some really like cool people that are having a good time, and I love this reaction. Normally I kind of like bristle when the crowd is like reacting and stuff, like shut the fuck up. We're in a movie theater.
Right.
But then I like embraced it. I'm like, okay, this is really cool. Like people are really, really getting into this. And so then it was more like, I'm watching what's going on the screen, but I'm also like anticipating how the crowd is going to react to it and enjoying that, because I love the Marvel movies, but I'm not nearly as invested to the point where I'm going to like stand up and cheer in a movie theater. Like I've never done that. I've laughed my ass off at a movie theater, but I've never like stood up and been like, yeah. So when other people do it, I'm like, oh, that's cool. It adds to the enjoyment. I like that pick. Which is a perfect lead-in for this next category for the New Blood, which is favorite superpower movie.
And I struggled with this because there were several nominations, and I kept coming back to my answer, and I kept resisting my answer because I don't like this movie at all. But it's Superman 2, which many people love and think is better than the original Christopher Reeve Superman movie, but is actually kind of a garbage fire train wreck if you really sit down and watch it. But it's my favorite superpower movie because they throw caution to the wind, and they introduce so many batshit, ridiculous, stupid superpowers in that movie, where Superman or the Phantom Zone villains can levitate people by pointing their fingers at them with this little laser beam that lifts them into the air, or Superman tears off his emblematic sigil from his chest and then throws it and traps a bad guy in this big plastic bag. Or when he wipes Lois Lane's memory with a roofie kiss at the end. They're throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. And I mean, as a 6 or 8 year old kid, I ate it up. I thought it was awesome. But going back, I'm like, well, that's not a super. Why is he doing that? It's just so bananas that I couldn't help but answer Superman 2.
I struggled as well, mostly with the definition of superpower, because some of the things I was coming up with were like, well, it's not really superpowers. It's more like technology that they have at their disposal. But I didn't care. I went with Iron Man.
Nice.
Because I was kind of reluctant, or at least tired of like the whole superhero movie when Iron Man came out. Like, I've seen it all. What are they going to show me? I also don't know a lot about Iron Man. At the time it was a pretty irreverent character. It wasn't Superman or Spider-Man or Batman. And I probably went into that movie going experience kind of with my arms folded, like, all right, show me what you got, impress me. And I walked out and I'm like, holy shit, like they really pulled that off. And I had absolutely no idea what it was going to lead to, but what a fantastic way to like kick off what is arguably the biggest franchise of all time. And at least in terms of quantity of movies, but Iron Man just really just ticked every box of what it needed to be. Like, you don't even have to be a comic book nerd to enjoy it. It's just, you can go into that movie and you understand the story, you buy into the story, and you're rooting for everyone that you should be rooting for in the movie. And at the end, you're like, all right, I'm a fan. What's next?
Awesome. I didn't remember you seeing that in the theater. That's great.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. That's a great pick. Iron Man is I love that movie, and I have a great affection for that movie because I was not yet married to my wife, but she was living with me at that point, but was on a business trip to San Francisco, and had an afternoon to kill before the convention kicked off, and found herself deciding to go see a movie, and she knew absolutely nothing about Marvel Comics. She'd never, I don't think, heard of Iron Man, but she chose that because she knew who Robert Downey Jr. was, and she knew that I was looking forward to seeing it, so she thought she'd go ahead and check it out. And I remember, it was a Friday evening, and I was sitting home, settling in to watch something myself on TV, and the phone rings, and it's my wife having just come out of the theater. She was so excited by what she had just seen that she couldn't wait to call me and tell me how awesome she thought it was and how much she loved it. I hadn't seen it yet. I was going the next day, but it was so much fun to hear how much she loved it and just couldn't wait for me to see it. And she's as invested in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as I am. I'm a comic book guy from the age of 3, so I have a deeper connection to Marvel as a whole than she does, but she is on board for anything they throw at us, watches them as often as I do, and it's all because of Iron Man. Nice. It cracked me up that your distillation of Jason Takes Manhattan, Friday the 13th, Part 8 was favorite Canadian movie.
What else is it going to be? Favorite movie about swimming? Favorite cruise movie?
Favorite boat movie? Well, you already answered
Speed 2,
2, yeah. So lay it on me. What's your favorite Canadian movie?
This was really tough as well, and I take the blame because I came up with some of these categories, but like, how do you define what a Canadian movie is? Is it something that feels Canadian? There's lots of movies these days that are filmed in Canada. Mm-hmm. Does that really count? Mm-hmm. So, and I'm pretty confident that I probably came up with the same answer as you, and I don't care. But my answer is Strange Brew.
Nice.
Okay.
Take off, eh?
It's just one of those movies where I feel like you have to be a certain age to even know of its existence. Like, it was just something that like came up with a group of friends that I had in high school, and they're like, you need to watch Strange Brew. And it's so stupid, but it's so funny. And it's so Canadian.
I don't know what you mean, eh? My favorite part of that movie is when Doug, is it Doug or is it Bob? I think it's Bob. He finds the vending machine that has chocolate milk in it, and he cracks it open, he starts chugging it, and his brother says, Hoser, that chocolate milk's 4 weeks old.
I mean, to this day, we quote that movie. There's just so many... so many quotable moments, and I can't tell you how many times I've said level 5. Like when Max von Sydow died, the first movie I thought of was Strange Brew, and I'm
Yep.
sure he loved that.
Uh, I mean, so I had to purposely choose another movie because I had a feeling that we would both choose this. But I have to comment on Strange Brew also. I mean, you're absolutely right. I agree with everything you said. It's my favorite Paul Dooley movie. It's my favorite Rick Moranis movie. It's my favorite movie other than Star Wars with the guy who played Gold Leader in Star
That's
Wars.
right, yeah.
It's hilarious. I saw it for the first time in 5th grade, and I've watched it every couple years since then. It's awesome. But because I had a feeling you might also choose that, I went with a backup, which is something I only saw recently, and it's thanks to the With Gorley and Rust podcast. But it's The Brood by David Cronenberg.
Oh yeah.
I really dug that movie a lot. It's slow. There are very potent payoffs here and there, but it's definitely a slow movie. But it stuck with me a lot more than any other horror movie I've seen in recent memory. And it's very dated, but it's cool. And I thought Oliver Reed was really good in it, and I thought that the little monster guys were creepy as shit. And I dug it a lot, and it actually made me a lot more interested in seeing more of David Cronenberg's work from over the years. I had seen some of it, and I really like The Fly, and I really love History of Violence, but I haven't seen a lot of his older stuff. And
Have you seen Jason X?
that was another reason that I was happy to choose this, because of his appearance as the professor guy.
Well, speaking of disastrous sequels, that was actually my category for Jason Goes to Hell. So, Greg, what's your favorite sequel that was just a complete disaster?
You're welcome to disagree with my definition of disastrous, but I chose Rambo Last Blood because it effectively ends the franchise. I think it was kind of a financial disaster. It's reprehensible on many, many levels.
Yeah.
But we
Go on.
we had so much fun watching that movie
Oh.
that I just can't help but love it, despite its virulent flaws in philosophy and execution. And it's an awful movie, but it's so goddamn entertaining.
I watched it for a second time pretty recently. I watched all the Rambo movies over the summer, and I just remember from, like, this is only going to make sense to people that have seen Last Blood, but from the moment that Rambo starts to fortify the farm for the arrival of the gang, I just giggled. You and I just giggled for the next 40 minutes or whatever that movie was, because it was just total absurdity of just like utter violence and chaos. And we're just giggling with our hands clasped, like, this is so awesome. So, yeah, I wouldn't say it was disastrous, but that's okay, because I had a hard time coming up with an answer, too, because when you put favorite next to disastrous, it's like, well, then how do you define it? So my favorite disastrous sequel is Gremlins 2, The New Batch, because that movie is straight up bonkers, especially compared to the first one. And if you haven't watched the Key and Peele sketch, where it's the pitch meeting where they come up with the idea for Gremlins 2, I mean, I've never seen something so on the nose of just like, when you unpack an idea in that way and you see, like, the movie's absurd, but then when you unpack it individual little segments and vocalize it to a group of people and then get agreement from people, which is what would have happened to make this movie, it just blows your mind that this movie ever happened. It's like,
That's hilarious. And like the Key and Peele segment is one of my favorite YouTube clips of all time.
right.
I am baffled by the amount of love that movie has, and I don't know that it's ironic. I think that there are people who defend that as a masterful display of, like, kind of almost like insubordination to the studio system.
It's campy.
It is.
And I think that's why people embrace it. It's kind of like a Rocky Horror Picture Show type thing, where it's like, that movie is not particularly good, but it's campy and it's fun and it's entertaining. And I think you could easily kind of squeeze in Gremlins 2 into something like that, where like you're going to get the same kind of group of people who are like, yes, I love this movie too,
Mm-hmm.
even though most people don't.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's a fair description. I like the original Gremlins so much that veering off in such a bizarre direction where, Hulk Hogan is yelling at me while I'm watching it. I'm like, what the hell? I saw it in the theater and I remember being like, I am uncomfortable. It should have been shelved. So, along the lines of Jason X, what's your favorite movie that sat on the shelf for a very long period of time before release?
Well, again, I got two answers here. One of them is going to totally hurt my street cred, so I have a second pick. But my first pick is Before Sunset. It came out 9 years after Before Sunrise, and I wouldn't say it was shelved. I don't know the politics that went into it. I'm sure there was a deliberate reason why it took so long to come out with the sequel. I mean, the third one didn't come out until 9 years after the second one, but it was not like I liked Before Sunrise. I remember watching it when I was in college and never thought it was a movie that needed a sequel, but it got one and I liked it. And I liked the third one too. I think it's a really interesting, like, slice of life thing. I think Linkletter does a really good job of showing life in an accurate way. So that's the one that would destroy whatever street cred I have. But the one that hopefully bounces me back into whatever bucket you want to put me in is Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, sweet. Nice.
That was originally planned all the way back in 1999. It was supposed to start filming in 2001. There was a number of reasons why it didn't end up happening. I'm sure Mel Gibson was probably attached to the original incarnation of it, and then it didn't come out till 2015. But, like, again, that was a movie that I never thought that I needed. I'm like, do I really need another Mad Max movie? But they pulled it off, and it kicks all kinds of ass.
That's a fantastic pick. Yeah, I mean, that had been gestating for so long that my buddy Eric and I had kind of vowed to see it together, but by the time it came out, life had taken us, in such divergent directions that we weren't able to link up to see it. So we're talking about maybe getting together and watching them all on video at some point.
Hold on a second. So you see movies with someone else?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No,
Just checking.
I don't have a friend named Eric. I made him up.
Okay, that's cool.
That's great. Like, it's funny. I for some reason haven't been able to make as potent a connection with Fury Road as it absolutely deserves. I think I've been watching it at the wrong times. I haven't necessarily been in the right mood to watch it, but I have no doubt that at some point I'm going to see it and be like, okay, I'm fully on board with this, because I love the Road Warrior, and I really like half of Thunderdome. So,
the Tina Turner half.
Right. Yeah. Right. So yeah, that's a great pick, and I forgot how long that had been sitting around. I think its filming was even derailed by the war in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I was the same way about Fury Road. I remember when it came out, I couldn't have been less interested, because it was like, why do we need another Mad Max movie? And I had just written it off before even seeing it, and then it came out, and everyone was like, you might want to see it. It's pretty awesome. And I normally cringe at that kind of reaction, because usually when everyone kind of jumps on something and says go see it, it ends up not being something I end up liking. But I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go. And I think I went by myself, and I walked out and I'm like, all right, I'm convinced I was wrong. That was a pretty cool movie.
I think that part of my my unjustly lackluster reaction to that movie is that it's such a marvelous visual movie that I haven't seen it the way I want to. So, as a matter of fact, when we were at Best Buy together earlier today, I looked to see if they had Fury Road in 4K, and I would have purchased it if they have, because I've only seen it on Blu-ray, which is great, but I feel like it needs the vibrancy of true 4K, and I think that maybe I'll kind of keep an eye out for a good upgrade on that disc, and maybe if I watch it that way, I'll finally be fully on board.
Nice.
Mine was Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, which
Wow.
I have only seen twice. It's a little movie with Michael Rooker,
Yeah.
who you know as Yondu from Guardians of the Galaxy, and that guy in Cliffhanger. It's a really unsettling, uncomfortable movie to watch. It's not a movie that I ever feel like watching because it's so frighteningly realistic. It's based on several real serial killers, and it's a horrifying experience to sit through. But it sat on the shelf for a couple years, and when it finally came out, it put Rooker on the map. And it's I wouldn't say it's watchable, but it's just such a damn gritty piece of fiction, of semi-fiction, that I really respect the hell out of it.
I'm aware of that movie enough that I can even, I don't know if it was the poster or if it's just a movie still that they show a lot, but it's like Rooker looking in the mirror in the bathroom.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know if I've ever seen the movie.
We should put that on our list to watch together. It's been a minute since I've seen it, so I could certainly revisit at some point. We could add it to our list to check out sometime.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance that, like, you know, you and I had a mutual friend in high school, and it seems like that would have been something that would have been recommended to us back in those days. So if I have seen it, it's been so long that I don't remember anything about it. The Freddy vs. Jason category was pretty easy. What's your favorite fight movie?
I actually had a tough time with this. I didn't want to choose a versus movie like Kramer versus Kramer or Alien versus Predator. Then you could think about like the Rocky movies or something like Fight Club or Bloodsport or something like that. But I kept coming back to this, and I'm willing to admit that it's not sticking to the definition of a fight movie. Like, I can't argue that, but I'm going to pick Tango and Cash because they are fighting with each other.
It's not Tango versus Cash.
I know, but even at the end, they're still bickering and competing, and
yeah,
it's a buddy movie, but they ain't best friends even at the end of that movie.
Yeah.
They're always taking shots at each other. Cash sleeps with Tango's sister, and I mean, it's just it's such a cheesy distillation of 80s action movie junk that I will watch it anytime I can. And
it's a dick measuring competition.
It's a dick measuring. They're fighting with their dicks.
Yeah. I'll allow it. I would not have considered that a fight movie, but you're right. Like, they're just constantly competing for getting a leg up, or whatever you want to call it. They want to be the one that's getting the attention. I went with a movie that I think is criminally underrated and underseen called Warrior. It stars Tom Hardy and Uncle Owen himself, Joel Edgerton. It absolutely steals from the Rocky formula of the underdog that rises to the top, but there is another layer that's added into it that I don't want to kind of give away because it kind of takes a while to build to it in the movie. But there are few movies that actually make me cry, and Warrior is one of them.
Really?
And I watched it within maybe the last year, and it was one of those things where it was like I kind of heard about it and didn't know where I heard about it, but I'm like, oh, I'll check it out. Watched it, and whatever year it came out, I don't remember what year it came out, but it was 100% my movie of the year that year. I was like, I don't care what the Best Picture nominees are. Warrior should be the Best Picture. It is fantastic, and if you have not seen it, I highly recommend it. It does have some great fight scenes, but it's not just physical fights. That's also like family fights, and it's great. It's really, really good.
That's fantastic. I never even, that I know of, heard of it.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people haven't, and I don't know why. Maybe it just got like a limited release in the theaters. I did not see it in the theaters, but whenever I have a chance to like recommend it to someone, I'm like, you gotta check this out.
Totally
it's really, it's powerful. It's smartly written. The acting is outstanding, and if you have any kind of heart, you will most likely get teared up or cry at the end. It's really, it's great.
I am going to absolutely check that out. In fact, I'm logging on to IMDb right now to make sure I remember to do that.
Nice.
So I think that it's, whether you like the movie or not, it's fair to categorize the reboot as a Michael Bay movie. Brian, what's your favorite Michael Bay movie?
Okay. So it should be The Rock, or it should be Armageddon. But for me, it's not. It's actually Transformers. And I will freely admit that Transformers is not the best Michael Bay movie. But in terms of build-up, in terms of what I was looking forward to seeing, there are very few movies that I was more excited to see than Transformers. You and I have talked about it on the podcast before. We were a huge Transformers fan growing up, so the idea of a live-action Transformers movie finally coming to reality was huge. Yes, we had our trepidations about what Michael Bay was going to bring to the franchise, but there was some teaser trailers that were really promising, and we had high hopes going into it. And it absolutely has its flaws, and there's things that I hate about that movie. But because of the significance it plays in my life in terms of how excited I was to see it and the buildup that we had and the fact that we drove to Indianapolis to meet together to see it.
Where we are right now.
Exactly. It just holds a special place in my heart. So I fully agree that it is not the best Michael Bay movie, but it is my favorite.
That's a great answer. Yeah, it was super fun for the year or 6 months leading up to that. Every time we would see a teaser or a trailer, and going in and that opening sequence with the helicopter at the Air Force Base was freaking awesome.
Like,
Still
chills,
is freaking
gave me
awesome.
chills. I was like, this is what I always wanted in a live action Transformers movie.
Yep, totally agree. For me, that went downhill from there.
Yes.
And I'm tempted to include Transformers in my answer for exactly the same reason you did, because I had so much fun seeing it with you and having that like elevate Transformers at that point, at least, to live action status was fun as hell. But I didn't answer the Transformers because the parts of that movie that I like aren't because of Michael Bay. The parts I like least are the Michael Bay elements of that movie. And I couldn't help but make note of the fact that after Transformers, the thing we were talking about the most was the Cloverfield trailer and not the Transformers movie.
Yeah.
So I didn't choose the Transformers, but I love that you did. I chose The Rock. I'm not a big Michael Bay fan, but I thought The Rock was a lot of fun when I saw it. It's not too over the top Michael Bay yet. I know that a lot of purists bristle at this, but I loved years later learning the theory that the Sean Connery character in The Rock is James Bond, and he's been imprisoned in the United States, and that he's basically playing the retired version of the famous character that he played earlier in his career. That's a fun wrinkle to watch that movie with. I haven't seen it in a minute, so it's due for a rewatch at some point. But I thought it was a cool setting, and I like Michael Biehn, and I like Ed Harris, and so that's what I picked.
It's hard to argue with that. The Rock is probably the best. Armageddon is probably where Bay starts to become Michael Bay, and things start to get a little absurd. But it's fun for its own reasons, and then things kind of get muddy after that. So, looking at the counter of the recording, we are pushing 2.5 hours. I still don't know if we're going to split these episodes up and release them as like separate episodes, or if we're just going to release one mega episode. But I want to at least give us the opportunity to pause here in case I do decide to split it up.
We are literally just masturbating at this point.
Right? This room is a mess. But we do have one more segment to get through that's probably going to take us a while. So either surprise, we're going to keep going. You've got another hour, or we'll see you next week or something. I don't know what we're going to do yet.
Thanks
but
for hanging in while we just
Right.
entertain each other.
No one is listening anymore. We've actually lost subscribers. But yes, we know how long this is running, and we did warn you at the beginning to buckle up. So thanks for hanging in there.